Ian Ward from New England Consulting Services. So thank you all for being here today. The plan is that we have a program with a series of speakers, and we're going to ask that you hold questions or put them in the chat as we're going through the talks. We'll have a little bit of time at the end of the presentation section to answer questions. And then after we get through that, we'll also have Zoom breakout rooms where we can drill down and get into a little bit more detail about any specific questions you have or project ideas that you want to share. So with that brief introduction, I am going to hand it off to Michael Leff. Michael Leff is the Executive Director of the Mass Association of Conservation Districts. Michael, thank you for being here today.
My pleasure. Hi, everyone. You can go to the next slide. I wanted to tell you just about what we have going on in Western Mass and specifically in the Connecticut River watershed. MACD is the state organization, so we help communication and collaboration and representation among the 13 conservation districts across the state. And then there are the 4 that are within, at least partially, in the Connecticut River watershed, which those of you who are from those conservation districts, it's presumably them. And that's part of Berkshire, part of Worcester, and then Franklin, Hampshire, and Hampden down the center there. We have MACD and our partners, a variety of things going on. The districts themselves have their own outreach that's going on to farmers, ranchers, landowners, and just conservation elements of the public with a whole variety of programs. We also we work in collaboration with NRCS, and they have their outreach that's going on in this same area. So it's always, we're working on how to communicate better so everyone knows what everyone else is doing. Along those lines, there are a few what's called the DEP, Mass DEP 319 projects, which have to do with controlling non-point source pollution. And Ian Ward actually has been primary consultant leading that effort for us, and he'll be talking in a bit. But there are 2 of those projects that are going on in the watershed here. One is the Western Mass project, and the other is really getting going now, and this is important, I think, for whatever we end up doing, all of us, and that's the agricultural regional coordinators through a DEP 319. Again, Ian's team is going to be the primary consultant on that, and the goal of those coordinators will be exactly what I said, so that everyone knows who's already reached out, who's been contacted, who's in the NRCS system, who isn't, all that kind of stuff. There's a lot. I'll also just mention briefly, we have a team that does agricultural preservation restriction property monitoring for the Massachusetts Department of Agricultural Resources, some of that in this region. And then also we partner with American Farmlands Trust on their RCPP on regenerative ag, which has to do with livestock primarily, also including this region. And then finally, the Massachusetts Healthy Soils Action Plan has finally been released. There will be funding to follow that. A lot of these kinds of projects also relate very much to soil, obviously, healthy soil. And finally, I guess you can go to the next slide on this, because I believe it shows our website link. But the new Massachusetts Association of Conservation Districts website. Next slide, please. Yeah, it's very active. We are, thanks to Megan Sadzinski, actually, who's on this call too. We've been loading new material practically daily, certainly a couple times a week, in the areas of funding opportunities, events, job opportunities, resources. So that's another great way to make connections and get the word out among all the partners we're working at. And yeah, so in particular, in the context of what we're talking about here, I just mentioned that because of other funding opportunities that continue to be posted there in addition to Long Island Sound. So that's all I've got for now, but I'll be participating and throughout the rest of the show here, and see some of you in the breakouts.
Thank you, Michael. I'm glad you highlighted all those programs. It's really exciting to see this building in Western Mass and the network of all the folks working in this space. And I think what's really great about having you and Dan here and Ian as well is that all these programs complement and fit very nicely with the Long Island Sound Futures Fund. So, developing partnerships and collaborations and cross-funding mechanisms is really important. So thank you very much. That was great to see all the highlights. And Dan, we also have Dan Wright. He's from NRCS. He's a state conservationist in Massachusetts, and we're really happy to have him here, bringing in the big picture view of what's happening at NRCS. So Dan, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Kim. I appreciate being here. And since you've already done the nice introduction of me, we can go ahead and go to the next slide that doesn't show that. So big picture for NRCS right now is really the Inflation Reduction Act. I'm sure many have heard about it, at least in passing, but essentially under the IRA funding for NRCS, there's going to be funding for a number of our regular programs like EQIP, CSP, ASEP, and what's not shown on here is RCPP, although it's been mentioned several times already by Michael. So a lot of funding coming through IRA to NRCS over the next coming years, which we'll talk about here in a bit. Next slide, please. So a quick overview of IRA funding. Is $19.5 billion for NRCS that has to be allocated, has to be set into contracts over the next 5 years. The breakdown of that $19.5 billion is roughly $8.4 billion for EQIP, $2.2 billion for CSP, $4.9 billion for RCPP, and $1.4 billion for ASEP. And I recognize all those programs are a bunch of kind of acronym jargon, but I recognize a bunch of the names in the participants here. So many of you probably know it, but I'll just run through them quickly for those who don't. EQIP is an environmental quality incentives program where we work with farmers to directly address resource concerns on their property. CSP is conservation stewardship program where we actually work with farmers already doing a great stewardship level on their farms and work to enhance it and make it just a little bit better. RCPP is our regional conservation partnership program where we actually work with you all and partners to bring additional funds and resources to address specific resource concerns within an area. And then ASEP is our agricultural conservation easement programs, which encompasses both our wetland reserve easements as well as our agricultural land easements. So under the IRA, NRCS received direction to use these funds specifically for climate mitigation and reducing greenhouse gas emissions while improving carbon storage. So we have to set some sideboards along within our programs to really address those types of activities. Examples would be things like cover crops or reduced tillage, wetland restoration, or tree and shrub establishment, and many more. I mean, there's I couldn't possibly go through the whole list, but if we can tie it to climate smart farming and kind of climate mitigation, we can probably fund it through one of our various programs. But partnerships are going to be a big key to us getting it done with this amount of money coming through NRCS. And we have to have it all out the door into contracts in the first 5 years. It's really going to take partners doing it. And many of you have partnered with NRCS in the past. For those of you who haven't, there's a lot of potential match dollars out there through the EPA, through NIFWF, through other organizations that can possibly, help bring some match for potential programs forward. We've done some really successful partnerships in the past. In fact, I have Michael F. since he's on the call. I've got his, oh man, I can't, the blurring is going to mess me up here. Here, I'll hold it right next to my face. The Small Farm Outreach Guide is a partnership we did with MACD You can probably find it on their website, would be my guess, as well as videos and all kinds of good stuff there. Some really cool things to engage. I know we're talking primarily about the Connecticut River watershed and area here, but I do have that cranberry photo in there. Shout out to Ian Ward coming up here. Wetland restoration was really kind of, a big deal in the Connecticut River watershed as well. As far as applying goes, for our regular programs, for a farmer to just walk in the door, we take applications all the time, year round, and then we'll set various batching dates for programs where we aggregate them together and then fund them. Our CPP dates haven't been announced yet, but when those do, be sure we will post them and send them out through our regular channels. And then our ASEP, our easement programs, just announced the date yesterday, March 17th, for this first round of funding. I recognize that's incredibly short, but if you've got any easements that you're looking to try to get done and you've been working on for a while, now will be the time to come forward with them, and we'll work with you to get it done just as quickly as we can. If not, look for more future announcement dates for those as well. Next slide, please. So this is just some projection bar graphs. I recognize there's no metrics on the left side there. That's somewhat intentional on my part. I cut out the dollars, but it's to kind of show what our funding is going to look like through the IRA. So the top one there where it says state IRA FA projection. FA is our financial assistance dollars. That's the actual money that goes to achieve conservation on the ground, to farmers, to partners, for application of conservation. And those dollars all have to be obligated into contracts by the end of 2026, fiscal year 2026. That's in the IRA law and when we have the funds. And then the reason that bar graph continues on through 2031 is that's when all those dollars have to actually be spent. So if we obligate a contract in 2026 for 100 acres of cover crop, we can fund that 100 acres of cover crop up until fiscal year 2031. But once we cross to fiscal year 2032, those dollars go away. We can no longer pay for it under the IRA funding. The TA funds, the bottom graph there, it's our technical assistance dollars. So that's dollars for NRCS staff or partner staff that we enter into contracts and agreements with to actually get the application of these funds on the ground. So while we have to fund contracts by 2026, we have those funds on a tapering down scale through 2031 to actually apply the practices there on the ground. So that's what I had for today. I did just want to say that, the IRA funds, is really intended to improve access for all farmers and landowners, regardless of size, scale, location, or operation. But if we're doing good climate work, that we've got a lot of funds coming through IRA over the coming years here, and it's going to take all of us to get it done. So thank you for that. Look forward to hearing conversations and comments and questions in the breakout rooms.
Thank you, Dan. It's really great to see the big picture and how this funding is going to play out over time. It's just an unprecedented opportunity, really, to try to get work done. So thank you for that. We're going to shift gears a little bit, and we're going to pass it over to Ian Ward. Ian is with New England Consulting Services, and Ian has done a lot of work engaging directly with farmers and getting projects implemented. So we kind of went from the high level, big picture, and now we're getting down into the weeds and the boots on the ground, as Michael would refer to it. So Ian, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Kimberly. Yes, Ian Ward, New England Consulting Services. It's a pleasure to be here. It's actually an honor to be here and thinking through and representing the farmer's voice in a lot of these conversations that can be really heady, but really essential. And let's boil it down to be simple. If it's simple, then it's understood. Give me the next slide, please. Building capacity for regenerative systems thinking. What does that mean? Regenerative systems, if anyone studied Carol Sanford's work, regenerative living, regenerative life and business, and Ridgway might relate to this, who's on this call. I went out to Montana, graduated from the University of New Hampshire, went out to Montana to become native, thinking I could become native. And the 4th and 5th generation Montanans that I was building log homes with after graduating from UNH, thinking I'd supply a basic need, basically said, go home. If you like what you see here, then leave us alone. We're managing it just fine without you armchair environmental folks telling us what to do. And I'm working alongside them, peeling logs, and but that message stuck with me. I came back to Massachusetts, where I am from, and I thought of the book that I read from Wes Jackson, Becoming Native to This Place. He was the founder of the Land Institute, Becoming Native to This Place. And I became native to this place. Next slide, please. I tried, after several attempts of buying a farm and losing out to development, which is, that it's hard to grow strawberries and raise beef when you're competing with a house lot pricing. I bought a wetland, which is a cranberry bog. And that became my cash crop. Learned through working with the Plymouth County Conservation District and NRCS, learned about programs, became a technical service provider back in 2004. And what was one of the beginning or newer TSPs at that point in time, and have maintained that certification through till today, and get a chance to help farmers dissect, understand what the differences are between federal funding, state funding, other funding, which 319 or Long Island Sound stuff could fit with RCPP, and they don't understand. They just think there's a government and there's money, and how do I get it? I'm afraid of applying for it. Am I going to raise any red flags? So these are my boys here back, and they're now 17 and 18, but just goes to show you that where there's a will, there's a way. And that's how we approach our operation. Next slide, please. Through that, working with Jeff LaFleur, who was a cranberry grower, and who invited me to participate in the Palm River Initiative, which I said no to multiple times because I wasn't sure that it was designed to be a success. I wasn't sure that representing farmers, if farmers even wanted to participate within NRCS programs, and lo and behold, they didn't. And finally, Jeff through MACD said, "Will you just do what you do for cranberry growers for other folks?" And so took on the initiative with the Palmer River, and 6 years later, we had in excess of $3 million of capital expenditures for improvements that prevented or reduced runoff into the Palmer River, helping keep clean water clean and keeping soil in place. Right? That's the overall mission. So how did we do that? Next slide, please. We met farmers where they were at. So this is a lot of gobbledygook in a way, right? We're all here, we kind of understand the jargon, but how do we make it simple, and how do we get farmers to want to hear it? It's very simple. If you meet farmers where they're at, I'm preaching to the choir here, but this is just something, since we're recording it, I'll say this. If you meet farmers where they're at and you say, what is going to help keep you in business for the next year, next 5 years, next 20 years? Is there another generation that's engaged? If there is, let's ride around the pickup truck together and talk. Let's sit around the kitchen table and talk. And what are we talking about? We're talking about the viability of the business. How much is the debt on the farm? Is it already protected under APR? What are the options to finance, in the first place, some of the conservation practices that they could take advantage of? Because ultimately, these are mostly reimbursable programs, and you've got to have the money up front. If you are, land rich, cash poor, like a lot of farmers are, how do you come up with that bridge money to actually implement the project before we get reimbursed? So we spend a lot of time doing that, a lot of hand holding. And these are some photographs of Westport and Western Mass of projects that we did get implemented after that process took place. So this is one farm here. They had a fire in their barn. They got all the livestock out, but no dairy barn anymore. They're in the process of rebuilding. Had all the cows in another spot, completely overwhelming that spot from a resource perspective. So in this case, we were helping with the heavy use area. We were helping with a tight tank that the affluence from the milk house and the barn could go into. And that was running prior to this directly down the road into a stormwater detention basin and out into the stream. So one example. Next slide, please. Here's another spot in Westport. So we did this in Palmer. We said, okay, we've proven a concept. Can we apply this other places? And Westport was the next place. This is an example of very simple, heavy use area. The area right outside the barn was trodden down. You can see the picture on the left. You can see the picture on the right, which is, cement being poured, pad being built, the cows on that pad within a day. This is the fencing wasn't up yet, so they're not kept on there yet. But sequential planning is also a key element to this. We can give the farmers everything, including the kitchen sink. If they don't apply it, or if it's too expensive to do, it's probably not going to happen. So thanks to Dan's leadership and those in NRCS that work under him in Massachusetts, we're looking at things we're looking at a big picture, holistic perspective. Let's think it all through, but let's take little bites at the apple. Let's not try to fix everything at one point in time. And in that regard, we have residual planning that's happening, relationships that are being built, and there's consistency. And then there's identification of, oh, this is Long Island Sound interests. These are NRCS, CSP funds, or EQIP funds, or this is MDAR money in the case of Massachusetts, Mass Department of Agricultural Resources. So what does that mean? This is duplicatable all throughout the Connecticut River watershed, this exact same procedure, which is boots on the ground, knock on doors, develop relationships, help to reduce the uncertainty as to where this money is coming from. Are you inviting people onto your land that are going to get you in trouble? NRCS is known as not doing that, but there are fewer NRCS folks available. So how can we work together as in collaboration? Other contractors like New England Consulting Services, other contractors that MACD may hire, or other conservation districts throughout the Connecticut River watershed, Long Island Sound. How can we engage those folks to have a common theme message saying, we're kind of joke, we're the government, we're here to help. That's the surest way to get thrown off the farm if you introduce that. But if you say, no, we're here to listen, we're to listen. We don't know if there's a good match for what you're looking to do, but surely let's talk. Let's talk about what are your pain points. Next slide, please. Another example, this is a beef operation, a pad for the manure that's on the left-hand side, which was washing down into the river. Make a pad, that manure gets put on that pad, problem solved. You slope the water away from where the water was going in through the manure. Very simple. Next slide, please. Western Massachusetts, cows in the river. There's a perception, whether or not there's actually a problem with the cows being in the river like they have been for the past 200 years, it's right on the road. And it's the perception that the cows are making a problem. And, to a certain degree they are. That is issue. So let's see if we can put up some fencing. What's the problem? Why have they been resistant? Because they needed a well. They needed another source of water. So let's put in the well first, then put in the fencing second. Problem solved. Next slide, please. Another example, stormwater runoff from a hill going right through the barnyard because there's a culvert that's collapsed. Why is the culvert collapsed? Well, because some piece of equipment went over it and there's fingers pointing, well, that's a town's culvert. Well, that's the private culvert. So what can you do as a consultant? You can call it to town and say, hey, if you pay for the pipe and we pay for the labor, do we have a deal? And sure enough, they're like, we'll consider that. We buy the pipe, you supply the labor. So we are leveraging funds through the grant monies that we know are available to help pay for the labor associated with getting that done and reducing all of this runoff going through that barnyard and directly into the watershed that is one of the biggest ones that we're studying. Next slide, please. Finally, I think this is the last one. Another example, manure currently outside, heavy use area, pad. But what I'm seeing on your right is actually the manure storage area that is not being utilized because the cows are in there. So let's get the cows out of there, have a heavy use area that the cows can be on, put the manure under the shelter, problem solved. So ultimately here, these are examples of very simple solutions that require a little bit of capital. If you can work with the farmers to meet them where they're at, have this discussion, build that trust, then you can actually get some implementation done. So with that, thank you, Kimberly.
Thank you, Ian. It's great to see if we could connect this funding and connect the partners and connect the project ideas together, we could get some things done. So Lynn, we're pretty much right on track here. I'm going to turn it over to you, and then I think we'll have some time at the end and also in the Zoom breakout. So I'd like to introduce Lynn Dwyer. She's the program director for the Northeast Coastal National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, and she's going to show you where the money is and how to get it. Lynn, it's all yours.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for the webinar highlighting opportunities associated with the Long Island Sound Futures Fund grant program. As Kim noted, I'm Lynn Dwyer. I'm the program director at the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, otherwise known as NIFWF, and I'm responsible for delivery of the Futures Fund grant program. I really liked what he had said about these programs being offered, the funds being available. I remember I used to work for another environmental organization in California, and we were doing a lot of outreach to farmers. And I had this great tool that had been developed. It was really, really good. I won't tell you the specifics of it, but it had a lot of bells and whistles to potentially address some conservation community concerns. So I take it to my colleague at NRCS, and I tell him, I say, Daniel, wow, it does this and this and this and this. And he says, oh my God, Lynn, that's such a great tool. What problem does it solve for the farmer? I just like that. I thought that was really good. And I think that was the point that Ian was making. These funds are available, they have priorities, but we do really need to address the question in terms of, these are just tools, these are opportunities. Are they tools and opportunities that solve a problem that needs to be addressed? I also like what he said about phasing. Take little bits of a project and build it over time. And I like the type of things he focused on, but I find in my own day, in my own professional life, that I'll have a big project and I can't get to all elements at once. And I take an iterative approach to it. Our grant program is more than 20 years old, and we here annually around the same time, and there's relatively significant amounts of money. So I would say if your project isn't ready for prime time, or you want to take a smaller bite of the apple, that's fine. That's definitely a way to position the funding, and certainly something that we would consider. So the Futures Fund 2023 anticipates approximately $10 million will be available for grants. We're seeking proposals to restore the health and living resources of Long Island Sound, and the program is managed in collaboration with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency and the Long Island Sound Study. That's kind of the mothership for a lot of Long Island Sound activities. Major funding is from EPA through the Long Island Sound Study, with additional funding from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Next slide. Okay, let me just give you a quick snapshot. As described, the purpose of the grant program is to restore the health and living resources of Long Island Sound. And you're probably wondering at this point, why offer grants in the upper basin states, in the upper watershed states of Massachusetts, Vermont, New Hampshire? So I always think about it in terms of the Connecticut River Valley. It's the place where the land channels rainfall and snowfall melt to creeks, streams, rivers that eventually flow to downstream Long Island Sound. And working with all of you, we can address pollution loading into all of those waterways, which makes for a healthier landscape for all of us, and certainly downstream Long Island Sound. The grant program aims to foster delivery of the Long Island Sound Comprehensive Conservation and Management Plan, which is known among its friends as the CCMP, because it's like too much to say constantly. This is really the blueprint for shared conservation in the Sound's watershed. I highlight the CCMP for those of you who may be considering submitting into the Futures Fund, the most competitive proposals do reference and align with CCMP priorities and actions. Happily, we do have some resources to help you create that link between your project and the CCMP, which I will go into in more detail later. The type of grants, implementation of the shovel-ready projects that result in quantifiable pollution prevention. These are 50,000 to 1.5 million. So I think that's a reasonably decent amount of money to get to implementation of big impact projects. We also have, and I think this is really beneficial, 50 to 500,000 for planning grants. And those can be everything from community engagement, watershed plans. It can be feasibility assessments, alternatives analysis, assessment and conceptual design, and final engineered permitting and planning. So that can be a mechanism to tee up a lot of different activities. And I'm going to talk about some projects that were really creative about the planning part of their process in that sort of phased iterative fashion to get to pipeline of implementable projects. The project performance period, the start and end date for Futures Fund is generally 24 months, although you can potentially request up to 36 months. It depends on the nature of the project. We do try to keep within the 2-year period, but for bigger, more complex projects, we can go with 36 months. Eligible applicants, 501c organizations, state and local government, tribes, and educational institutions. So I know the NRCS strategy is frequently to provide cost share or whatever to the farmers directly. We've had grants come in where a resource conservation district or a resources conservation district association has stood in and distributed funds through the RCDs or to the farmer for the project work. It's just an individual farmer or agricultural producer or rural landowner wouldn't be able to apply directly, but you can apply through some of these other mechanisms. So I wanted to make that point. Match. Yay. Always the big question. Super popular section of the webinar. Match is 25% of the total requested from Futures Fund. It can be cash or in kind. We don't care. Non-federal in source. It has to be related to project being delivered and be expended during your project start and end date. Here's some good news. You don't have to have all the match in hand at the time that you apply. Match may change over time. Maybe you were getting some cash match from a private foundation and you also had in-kind match from a local group that was going to do some of the work on the project site. And you ended up getting less money from the foundation, but more money from your volunteer hours. That's fine. No problem with those sorts of changes as long as they meet the other requirements, non-federal, relate to the project, all of that. One thing, you will be held accountable for the total match number that you submitted in the application. But again, some of your match may be applied for, some of it may be received, and you can adjust and adapt over time. You're just held to that total number. Timeline. Yay, the application, the RFP opened yesterday. And so I think many of you have received notification, and I think that Throwe will put the application link, the RFP link in the chat, and just look under application information. There's lots of fun stuff in the summary and everything, but where you want to go is application information. You have just over 2 months to develop a proposal with applications due on May 10th. If you need assistance in Massachusetts, you can contact Kim Groff, whose email is shown on the slide. And again, we're going to announce the awards in November 2023. Okay, next slide. Okay, you can use that link, but here you go. nfwf.org/LISFF. Yay, easy, right? Okay, the Long Island Sound watershed. Is my project in the watershed? The map shown on the slide is a snapshot of the Long Island Sound watershed boundaries in Massachusetts. If you're not sure whether your project fits, the map's interactive. So the link is in the RFP, and you're able to drill down on your potential project location by entering the address or the city or the zip code, and it'll take you right to that site location and show you whether it fits in the boundaries or not. Next slide. Okay, examples, types of projects. Now, this is kind of the interesting part of the presentation, I think. What types of projects are eligible for funding? And by the way, you'll note some repetition on one particular word. Projects that accelerate adoption of agricultural conservation practices that reduce nitrogen, nutrient runoff. So technical assistance or technical service projects, collaborations to build a pipeline of projects, regenerative agricultural projects, soil health practices and management systems, precision nutrient management systems. So I think these do cover a lot of the agricultural practices that folks are just familiar with, which have the best potential impact on improving water quality and are hopefully doable within the footprint of the farm. And again, if you have ideas, your ideas are definitely welcome, and you can send them to Kim Groff at kim@throwenvironmental.com, and you'll see her email there, and I think we'll remind you of this throughout the presentation. Next slide. Okay, further examples of types of grants that we funded that address that agricultural space. So Bed and Bank, Connecticut River Conservancy, and Trout Unlimited have done a lot of bank stabilization, riparian restoration, floodplain restoration. You do have to show the nexus to nitrogen nutrient reduction, but these practices, I think, are things that do yield those sort of benefits. And the grants have ranged from the project for Trout Unlimited is on some retired farmland. It's $143,000 to do a nice riparian restoration in Vermont. And the Connecticut River Conservancy has been out talking to rural landowners, farmers, everybody pretty much, to do these bank stabilization and riparian restoration projects. Some of the specific rural and ag grants that we've given, and I hope to see more of these in future, encourage you. Vermont Association of Conservation Districts, they're actually currently prioritizing areas to restore pocket wetlands and ag fields. So they got 2 grants totaling $254,000 to actually do the prioritization, the planning, and the outreach activities to tee up this particular practice focused on restoring pocket wetlands and ag fields, because there is a really good benefit to reducing loading into local waterways. The Essex County Natural Resources Conservation District, again in Vermont, they actually developed a cover cropping species mix. They did some planting and monitoring because it was just a single site, but they wanted to show me to neighbors in the farm community to potentially show it could work for others who might be interested in working in this area. Again, the Connecticut River Conservancy got $250,000 to provide technical assistance and design support for nitrogen prevention projects on rural lands. Rich Earth Institute. Now, you all might have heard of this, but it's kind of interesting. It was in the New York Times under the title, the article title, P Cycle, PEE cycle. So they received multiple grants. Average was about $95,000 to deploy urine reclamation technology. So what they do is donors donate their urine. Sounds good, right? And then they take it and they make high quality fertilizer, which they provide to farmers in Vermont to for fertilizing their farm field. So it deals with one of the big issues that we have. I mean, in the lower part of the watershed closer to the coast, you know, we don't always call them watersheds, we call them sewer sheds. Yum, right? So anyway, I think that addressing these sources of nitrogen nutrients through innovative technologies like that is something we're very interested in. And then the Housatonic Valley Watershed Association, this is a project in New York and in Connecticut, is going to engage with agricultural producers to establish regional priorities, provide technical assistance, support planning for 6 on-farm conservation plans. So they're actually supporting the planning activity, and they're aiming to address nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediment pollution. And the grant was for $194,000. So this is very collaborative model to take a particular types of farms through the process and build it together, shared learning, shared information, etc. Now, next slide. I particularly like this project. I can't tell you a lot about it yet, but I think they did a really good creative work on it. It was just recently funded, which is the Windham County Natural Resources Conservation District. And they're going across 2 states, Vermont, New Hampshire, which was great because it like great regional approach associated with this. And again, like the Housatonic Valley example, identification of practices, conducting trials. So they have a blue ribbon panel with agricultural producers and others to identify practices that folks think they can actually do on the ground. They're going to select those, and then they're going to conduct trials and assess and monitor results to inform selection of the suite of best management practice that they're going to try and use to reduce nutrient nitrogen on farms. It's a big grant, $418,000, almost $419,000 over a number of years. And what they're doing essentially is not really reinventing the wheel here. They kind of took a lot of ideas from the Chesapeake. What the Chesapeake Ag Group did was they said, we've got 200 potential practices. Let's find the ones that have the best value for reducing pollution into our local waterways, but also are doable on farms. And it took them a while. And I think they went from like 200 practices to 10 plus. These are the ones with the most impact. But it was time that everybody got to the same place about what would be best to do from, you know, that three-legged stool: sustainability, economics, and the environment. And then what they did was they actually did work to show, here's a traditional farm practice deployment, and here's something that's a little bit more innovative, and then monitoring results, because the concern with quality and amount of yield, timing, all of that becomes really major issues. And they wanted to, again, address that three-legged stool and show and share with farmers that this is something that is doable and has benefits, or a zero impact economically, but could do good conservation work. So I like it. They just started. They're going to just start, and they're doing their work now. But I think it's a very smart, interesting way to work cooperatively together to find those common grounds. I think, as Ian said, to meet the farmer where they live, and also engage the conservation community around what they think is most important to work on. So you can see we do allow for that sort of iterative, phased approach to delivery of projects. And we wanted to take some of the burden off the farmers directly. Next. Okay.
So Lynn, we have one question in the chat, and we're pretty much on time, but I thought most folks might be interested in this.
Okay.
So the question is, are fiscally sponsored projects eligible to apply? So in other words, if you have somebody that serves as administrator of the project, and also, is having a fiscally sponsored a negative for a successful competitive application?
Fiscal sponsorship is fine. And as a matter of fact, it's a really good way to think about projects sometimes, because, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit later, about the types, like the administrative burden, honestly, of managing some of these funds. You really want to understand those fully, and perhaps you're not fully staffed or with enough systems to deliver a project, and what you really want to do is work on the fun part. Talk to the farmers, get the work done. Fiscal sponsorship is an appropriate and acceptable mechanism for doing so. And we actually do not look upon it negatively, because we'd rather you realistically are able to deliver the project. And it's not always just about, yay, great program or project delivery. It's about administration, it's about finance. So yes, that's a great strategy to do.
Awesome. Well, we don't have any more questions in the chat right now. I think maybe we'll also have another opportunity in the Zoom groups to answer questions. So maybe we should just keep things moving, Lynn.
Okay, that sounds fine. Okay. I'm going to focus on some tips for creating a competitive grant proposal. And this will include some quick guidance about the major parts of a proposal and things to think about when preparing it. So we're going to get into the guts of a Long Island Sound Futures Fund proposal. Okay, next slide. All right, what you see again is a snapshot of the parts of a Futures Fund application. You'll see the word Easy Grants application in the title. It's parts of LISFF Easy Grants application. Easy Grants is NIFWIF's online application system. And the parts of a proposal include really simpler sections like contact and organizational information, location, map, and then other parts which tend to take more time. So you have project information, uploads, metrics, budget, match, permits as relevant. So what this gives you a sense, and I highly recommend you go in and look in the system. Look, you can register, you can start, you don't have to submit, but get a little familiar with what is being required, and I think it could be very helpful. So just some useful tips. If you have questions, always have your Easy Grants identification number, which is on the top left of the page. I'm sorry, the top right of the page. It's right on the top and it says Easy Grants ID. So if you reach out to us and say, Easy Grants is hard, it's not working, help. If you give us that number, it helps us work more quickly. Or maybe you're reaching out to Kim and you're saying, I'm doing project 76635. And I'd like some feedback about that. So sometimes we can write a quick look at that and it can be super helpful. There's also a frequently asked questions and help bar. You'll see that on the bottom of the page. On the left side, these are really tailored to the part of the application you're working in. So you can be very useful resources. So if you go into help and you're in the budget section, it's going to answer budget questions like, what does contractual actually cover? What does personnel mean? So those can be very helpful to you. At any point in time, you can also seek help. It's not a real time you ask and suddenly you get answered, but our Easy Grants department really answers questions fairly quickly. So the help function's always there. You will also want to check out, you see it's circled there, the uploads page as one of your first tasks. It has a list of items and templates you'll need to collect and prepare and upload into a proposal. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. If you look in the middle of this slide, there's a validation summary, which helps you understand where you are in the application at any given time and what still needs to be completed. I want to mention that you can work on a proposal in sections in any order you want, moving in and out of Easy Grants over time. This does not apply, except there's a caveat, the mapping section. You need to create your map in one fell swoop. It's not going to be like 5 hours. You either draw lines or you upload a shapefile or whatever, but you have to sit and do it and save. You can't go back in and do it later. The system eats it, and that's never a good moment for you. Okay, next slide. Okay, tips for competitive proposal. So what we're talking here about is reading the RFP and associated documents. Yeah, I know, duh, Lynn, read the RFP. The exciting parts of the RFP are the range of funding and the conservation priorities, but there's a lot of other really, really good information, such as ineligible uses of grant funds, or compliance requirements. Oh man, do I have to read that? Yeah, you do. And the reason why is it really lays out requirements which inform in development of your timeline, of your budget, of your methods, and what you'll need to consider in grants management. And these sections include compliance, procurement, quality assurance, as mentioned, ineligible uses of grant funds. I think it's really useful to understand if you need to budget time for a particular activity or for procurement or other things. So I highly recommend you read the RFP because it can really inform deployment of your project administratively, financially, as well as programmatically. I always suggest people truly sharply focus their proposal narrative. These are fairly standard sections in a grant proposal: problem, solution, methods, community impact, sustainability, these types of things. The most competitive proposals are the ones that focus on a specific problem to be addressed during the start and end date of your project. Again, duh, but what we see a lot, honestly, I know none of you would ever do this, but it may be worthwhile saying, is there's a lot of narrative about the wider scope of the problem, such as pollution is an international issue. Yes, it is. Pollution is an issue in the United States. Pollution is an issue in Massachusetts. All good information might not be necessary to put in your narrative. What you want to talk about, pollution is an issue which has a downstream impact on Long Island Sound, this site, our community, and this is kind of the nature of the challenge that we're trying to deal with. And this is how we would like to start potentially addressing the problem. Another, and I do provide in the tips for competitive proposals, some of the guidance documents that we develop, because we don't have to want you searching all over the place for information. We want to provide useful information to you. So guidance would include, we have a full proposal tip sheet. Now this document for writing the proposal or working in the online system is great. It takes you through every section of how to work with the online system. And I also put information in it with examples about how to write a title, how to write a project description, how to write an abstract. Oh, okay, yay. That's the first page that a reviewer sees, the amount you're asking for, who's asking for it, where it is, what the major activities are, and what the accomplishments are. So that project information page, the title, that's where you grab your reviewer's first appreciation of your project. There's also a guidance document called Metrics and Implementation Action Tracking Guidance. Okay, so you remember what I said about you need to align with and reference the Comprehensive Conservation and Management Plan for Long Island Sound. See, when you say it for a long time, it makes you want to say CMP. That document, it has several columns. One is, and you all are in the Clean Waters and Healthy Watersheds section, because this is all about nitrogen and nutrient prevention or reduction, is it gives you the theme of the CCMP. Then it tells you these things that are called implementation actions. They're the activities that the CCMP is supposed to foster. Then there's a section which says type of project activities and metrics. So you can actually work on creating your narrative by having this handy dandy and colorfully prepared PDF where we take you from, you're in this theme, here's your implementation action relative to the types of project that you're doing, and here's some metrics that you might want to consider. So again, it's a nice synopsis which may help you not having to read the entire, I don't know, 300-page CCMP. Another thing is that we really do recommend is that you gather relevant letters of support, photos, plans, permission in advance of submission. Give yourself some time. The administrative and financial documents, you want to pull those together early rather than just before you're submitting. It reduces your anxiety around submission. Letters of permission are super important to our review team. So what they always look for is if you say you're working with a partner or you're aiming to engage a particular targeted constituency like rural landowners and farmers, they're going to want to see things like, yes, we are participating as partners in this way, or a letter from a key representative of that constituency that says, as farmers, representatives of farmers, we would find this project delivery very valuable because. Reviewers look at that because they want to validate and document that the project will have impact. The letters of support that you don't necessarily need are ones from, say, your senator or your congressional representative. We are super appreciative of the fact that these individuals, these public servants, bring in resources to communities through grant programs like this. I think with the reviewers, we really do appreciate that they appreciate the program, but what we're looking for relative to your proposal is if you say you're going to do it with partners, or you're validating its technical merit, or you're saying that you're going to reach out to the constituency, or you're working on somebody else's property and you need permission from them to participate, we're looking for those sorts of letters. For projects that may be in a planning phase where you can't actually evaluate what the nitrogen or nutrient reductions will be, take a photo, show us before conditions, because that may help us better understand the problems that you're trying to address. So I think those are some of the things that would be very useful. Next slide. Okay, further tips for a successful application. So research your contractual line items. A lot of times you don't have the in-house expertise to deliver some elements of your project. Maybe you need GIS support. Maybe you need an environmental consultant to help you with permitting, or they're going to do a hydrological assessment. What you should do, and I think you probably all do this anyway, is go out and do some early procurement to inform your budget. Now, you don't necessarily have to promise anybody any work. You're just saying, look, we're considering doing this. We want to talk to some entities that could potentially be engaged to do this type of work. This is what we're thinking about our scope. What do you think we need to address? And can we get some sense of cost from you? And do that with 2 or 3. And I think that'll help you, because you don't want to get to a situation where you don't have enough funds or you have too much money. That actually happens, believe it or not. I don't want you to give me any money back, please. And so we really do recommend that you do that sort of research. Providing budget notes. Reviewers love budget notes. It doesn't have to be 50 paragraphs. It just needs to be a number of lines explaining how you arrived at the cost and what this means. If you don't do it, reviewers ask questions, and if you were to receive a grant, our compliance department would make you do it. So please do the budget narrative. We have guidance, detailed budget instructions, and again, the full proposal tip sheet, which are all on the Long Island Sound Futures Fund website. So you can get this guidance, because I don't expect you to remember all of this. It's more trying to give you a sense of the what rather than the how. I mentioned metrics and link to the CCMP already with that tracking guidance document. Use it. Don't make your life harder. It's got a lot of just synopsized information to actually help you prepare to pick your best metrics and make your relationship to the CCMP. I said collect documents early, consider evaluation factors, and familiarize yourself with the online system, which is easygrants.nifwif.org. And then the guidance is the full proposal tip sheet. Next slide. Okay, here's a little snapshot of our budget. So we provide this to you because we think it's really helpful for you to get a sense of the type of things that you can ask for in a budget. So for example, common categories: personnel, travel, supplies and materials, equipment, contractual service, indirect rate. Those are the types of things that you would generally ask for funding. So personnel is just the folks that actually are employed by the applicant organization of record and ultimately the grantee organization of record. However, you might end up having a line item under, it's under contractual, but it's called subawards. Maybe you have a partner and you want to provide them some compensation for their participation. They're not making a profit off this, they're just your partner, but you maybe need to provide them some resources to actually participate. So that would be a circuit there. They would not be under personnel. They would be under subaward, under contractual, because they're not the folks that are receiving the grant funds directly. Supplies and materials versus equipment. Equipment is like, if you buy a big piece of equipment that has a unit price of $5,000, that's equipment. If you buy 5,000 pencils that cost $1 each, that's not equipment, that's a supply, because it's $1 for the unit cost. We talked a little bit about contractual services, and I want to mention indirect. Now, for folks that may have do this a lot and with different federal agencies, they might have what's called a negotiated indirect cost rate agreement, where they establish an indirect rate with the federal government. We'll accept any indirect rate that you have via your NICRA. But if you don't have a NICRA, or don't even know what it is, or don't care to know what it is, you can request what's called the de minimis rate, which is 10%. And it's fine to request indirect cost because, hey, you got to keep the lights on and everybody needs a desk. So let me just tell you two things. One is there's an indirect cost policy and calculator on the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation site if you're not sure how to do it, but also on your project information page and your budget page, if you said on your project information page you were asking for $250,000, and then your budget came out to be $250,000.56, the system would not allow you to submit because the numbers don't match. So whatever your budget total is, that's your grant request. I know that sounds silly, but you'll thank me if you do submit a proposal that you don't run into this problem. Next slide. Budget narrative, as mentioned, always do this. Lynn, it's redundant to the narrative. I don't care. Do it. Okay, because like it's just the budget and the narrative have to align. And so if you provide some of the information, even from your narrative in the Budget Justification Center, what it tells is it says to the reviewers, yeah, they know what they're doing. Everything hangs together. Next slide. Okay, as I mentioned, collect your documents early. So this is your upload page, and you'll see there are multiple documents. So one thing I want you to do immediately after you go into Easy Grants is go to the uploads page, look at the list of documents. It's also in the tips, but there are these hyperlinks. You'll see them in blue, and one of the hyperlinks is to the narrative. So you go in, you download it into your C drive, you write your narrative, and then you upload it back into Easy Grants. But what I want you to do is capture that narrative so you begin thinking through your project, because the narrative and the budget do hang together. So you want to do that early. Okay, next slide. Okay, evaluation criteria. This is really important. So there's two things I want to say about this. Reviewers use these evaluation criteria to comment on and rate your grant proposal. So when you actually write your proposal, just like check off in your mind or the way you're writing it to make sure you're addressing these elements. And the questions in the narrative are actually written to capture some of this information. But here's a second recommendation. Sometimes when I write and I'm really intensely writing things and I look at it later and I think that I was brilliant and said like lots of clear, important things to get money. And then I look at it like a year later, I'm like, oh my God, this doesn't make any sense. Or wow, that section could have been written better. get somebody else to look at your proposal submission before you send it in. And you can even give them this evaluation criteria and say, could you look at it in terms of this and make sure that I hit these? Check, 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 check. It really is very beneficial. And it's what the reviewers use to evaluate your proposal. Next slide. So Throwe is recording this. They're going to provide the slides to you. And this is just a synopsis of guidance and resources that I mentioned during my presentation relative to the different sections that you'll be developing in your proposal. So it's a little cheat sheet for you if you'd like it. But a lot of this, all of this is on the web page, and you can use it or not use it. But I just wrote the best practices for letters of support, so maybe it's something you want to read at bedtime. Okay, next slide. Other funding in, we always get questions. Yeah, this is great. Do you have any other funding for projects that I might be interested in that don't necessarily fit within Futures Fund? Yes, we do. Thanks for asking. So New England Forests and Rivers Fund seeks to sustain healthy forests and rivers that provide habitat for diverse bird populations, as well as freshwater and diadromous fish. America the Beautiful, new challenge. Locally led ecosystem restoration projects that invest in watershed restoration, resilience, equitable access, workforce development, corridors, connectivity, and collaborative conservation. I have to read these because these aren't mine, so sorry. And the National Coastal Resilience Fund, which seeks to restore, increase, and strengthen natural infrastructure to protect communities while also enhancing habitat for fish and wildlife. So those are the things that you would want to think about for potential other sources of funds. So I see a lot of questions are coming in. So maybe Kim, I'll hand it back to you and maybe we can answer those. And are we good on time? Are we okay?
We're running a little over. What I was thinking is I want to allow the full 25 minutes in the breakout room. So we may extend a little bit. And for anybody that needs to drop off at 2:30, if you have another meeting, you can, but we will come back to the main Zoom room and allow a time for additional questions.
Okay, is there anything we can answer super quick that would be a benefit broadly to the group?
Well, we have one question here. What level of expertise knowledge should we assume from the reviewers, acronyms, science terminology?
A very high level of expertise. I have honestly about 85 reviewers, and we assign based on, these are third-party neutral folks that don't have any relationship to delivery of these, direct delivery of these projects, and they're based on, the assignment of proposals is based on specific expertise.
Okay. So we're going to transition to the breakout room. We will allow a full 25 minutes. And if you do need to log off at 2:30 because you have a hard stop, feel free to do so. And then we'll allow a couple minutes to reconvene if there's any lingering questions.
So we'd also want to say, this isn't the last time you could ask us questions. This is just to get your motors running and get things started. As things come up, you can reach out to Throwe, whatever, to get further feedback, and we're happy to provide it.
Absolutely.
May I jump in for just a quick moment?
Yeah.
Lynn's right that there's a high level of expertise, but there are also a high volume of acronyms. So it would be appreciated, even though you should expect people to understand what you're saying, to define your acronyms if you first don't. If you when you first use them, there are multiple uses of the acronym ECAD, and they mean very different things. So it's just good practice to always do that, no matter what.
Thank you, Bessie.
Thank you. We'll see you in the Zoom rooms.
All right, thanks, folks. So you should get a message that'll pop up in just a second.